The moment Palpatine knew that Anakin was all his was during the final fight with Dooku. All he had to do was give Anakin a little bit of permission to just act on his anger, his fury, his fear. And Anakin went all in, embracing the power he didn't know that he had, and defeating a Sith Lord with relative ease after giving in. Anakin became entranced, and Palpatine knew that he was ready to discard of his apprentice and approach Anakin. But today I want to take you through Anakin's dark thoughts immediately after the fight that were not in the movie. His internal conflict as he realizes what he's done is super cool to see, and we get a new look at Palpatine manipulating him. Stay tuned for the whole thing, because it gets really interesting, but before we do begin, thank you all so much for 4,000 subscribers. Every day I get closer to being able to do this full time, which means bigger and better content. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. Also, just to help support, I'm launching my membership program on here. All you have to do is click the join button it's right next to my icon on this YouTube page, and for any of the tiers that you decide to click on, you get the same perks. One exclusive fan fiction per month that you get to watch at least a month before it's released publicly, if I ever decide to release it publicly, along with some cool icons, exclusive streams once per week, once we have 10 members, and more. I want to see if, this is a thing that people want to do to help support. If so, awesome. If not, totally understand. Times are tough out there. Anyways, yeah, the exclusive fan fiction to members, it won't take away from public content. It's just another thing you'd get on top of all my current content. So, if we get enough members, I'll definitely start pushing one of those out per month. Thanks, everybody. Alright, sorry about that. Back to the video. We're going to jump right into the story as Dooku is on his knees with two lightsabers at his throat. Enjoy. Anakin, Palpatine said quietly. Finish him. Years of Jedi training make Anakin hesitate. He looks down upon Dooku and sees not a Lord of the Sith, but a beaten, broken, cringing old man. I shouldn't. But when Palpatine barks, do it, now, Anakin realizes that this isn't actually an order. That it is, in fact, nothing more than what he's been waiting for his whole life. Permission. And Dooku, as he looks up into the eyes of Anakin Skywalker for the final time, Dooku knows that he has been deceived not just today, but for many, many years. That he has never been the apprentice. That he has never been the heir to the power of the Sith. He has only been a tool. His whole life, all his victories, all his struggles, all his heritage, all his principles, sacrifices, everything he's done, all his dreams, grand vision for the future empire, and the army of the Sith have only been a pathetic sham, because all of them, all of him, add only to this. He has existed only for this, to be the victim of Anakin Skywalker's first cold-blooded murder. First, but not, he knows, the last. Then, the blades crossed at his throat, uncrossed like scissors. Snip. And all of him becomes nothing at all. Murderer and murdered, each stared blindly at one another. But only the murderer blinks. The severed head's stare was fixed on something beyond living sight. The desperate plea frozen in place on its lips echoed silence. The headless torso collapsed with a slowly fading sigh from the cauterized gape of its trachea, folding forward at the waist, and though making its obsidians before the power that had dripped away its life. The murderer blinked again. Who am I? He thought to himself. Was he the slave boy on a desert planet, valued for his astonishing gift with machines? Was he the legendary pod racer, the only human to survive that deadly sport? Was he the unruly, high-spirited, trouble-prone student of a great Jedi Master? The star pilot, the hero, the lover, the Jedi? Could he be all these things? Could he be any of them, and still done what he has done? He thought. He was already discovering the answer at the same time that he finally realized he needed to ask the question. The deck bucked as the cruiser absorbed a new barrage of torpedoes and turbo laser fire. Dooku's severed head stared bouncing along the deck and rolled away as Anakin woke up. What? He'd been having a dream. He'd been flying, fighting, fighting again, and somehow in the dream, he could do whatever he wanted. In the dream, whatever he did was the right thing to do, simply because he wanted to do it. In the dream, there were no rules. There was only power, and the power was his. Now Anakin stood over a headless corpse that he couldn't bear to see, but he couldn't make himself look away. And he knew it hadn't been a dream at all, that he'd really done this. The blades were still in his hands. The ocean of wrong he'd dived into had closed over his head, and he was drowning in it. The dead man's lightsaber tumbled from his loosening fingers. I couldn't stop myself, he said, and before the words even left his lips, he heard how hollow and obvious was the lie. You did well, Anakin. Palpatine's voice was warm, and an arm around Anakin's shoulders. You did not only well, but right, he said. He was too dangerous to be left alive. From the Chancellor, this sounded true, but when Anakin repeated it inside his head, he knew that Palpatine's truth would be one he could never make himself believe. A tremor that began between his shoulder blades threatened to expand into a full case of the shakes. He was an unarmed prisoner, Anakin said. That simple, unbearable fact, that was truth. Though it burned him like his own lightsaber, truth was something he could hang on to, and somehow it made him feel a little bit better, a little stronger. He tried another truth, not that he could have stopped himself, but I shouldn't have done that, he said, and now his voice came out solid and simple and final. Now he could look down at the corpse at his feet. He could look down at the severed head. He could see them for what they were. A crime. He'd become a war criminal. Guilt hit him like a fist. He felt it, a punch to his heart that smacked breath from his lungs and buckled his knees. It hung on his shoulders like a yoke, an invisible weight beyond his mortal strength, crushing his life. There were no words in him for this. All he could say was, "It was wrong." And that was the sum of it right there. It was wrong. Palpatine spoke again. Nonsense. Disarming him was nothing. He had powers beyond your imagination. Anakin shook his head. That doesn't matter. It's not the Jedi way. The ship shuddered again, and the lights went out. Have you ever noticed that the Jedi way, Palpatine said, invisible now within the stark shadow of the general's chair, is not always the right way? Anakin looked towards the shadow. You don't understand. You're not a Jedi. You can't understand. Anakin, listen to me. How many lives have you just saved with the stroke of a lightsaber? Can you count them? But it wasn't wrong, Anakin. It may not be the Jedi way, but it was right. Perfectly natural. He took your hand. You wanted revenge. And your revenge was justice. Revenge is never just, Anakin said. It can't be. Don't be childish, Anakin. Revenge is the foundation of justice. Justice began with revenge, and revenge is still the only justice some of us can ever hope for. After all, this is hardly your first time, is it? Did Dooku deserve mercy more than the Sand People who tortured your mother to death? That was different, Anakin exclaimed. In the Tusken camp, he'd lost his mind. He'd become a force of nature, indiscriminate killing, with no more thought or intention than a sand gale. The Tuskens had been killed, slaughtered, massacred, but that had been beyond his control, and now it seemed to him as if it had been done by someone else, like a story he had heard that had little to do with him at all. But Dooku had been murdered by him, on purpose. Here in the general's quarters, he had looked into the eyes of a living being, and he coldly decided to end that life. He could have chosen the right way. He could have chosen the Jedi way. But instead, he stared down at Dooku's severed head. He could never unchoose this choice. He could never take it back. As Master Windu liked to say, there is no such thing as a second chance. And he wasn't even sure he wanted one. He couldn't let himself think about this, just as he didn't let himself think about the dead on Tatooine. He put his hand to his eyes, trying to rub away the memory. You promised we would never talk about that again, Anakin said, and Palpatine replied, And we won't, just as we never need speak of what has happened here today. It was as though the shadow itself spoke kindly. I have always kept your secrets, have I not? Yes, of course, Chancellor, but... Anakin wanted to crawl away into a corner somewhere. He felt sure that if things would just stop for a while, an hour, a minute, he could pull himself together and find some way to keep moving forward. He had to keep moving forward. Moving forward was all he could do, especially when he couldn't stand to look back. The view wall behind the general's chair blossomed with looping ion spirals of inbound missiles. The shuddering of the ship built itself into a continuous quake, gathering magnitude with each hit. Anakin, my restraints, please, the shadow said. I'm afraid the ship is breaking up. I don't think we want to be here when it does. And that's where we're going to end our story today. That's the Revenge of the Sith novelization. No matter how hard I try to make videos on other books and stuff, this book draws me back in. It's just so wonderful. It really is. So well written. What do you think about all this? I thought, okay, one thing that doesn't have... I'm reading way too into this, but at one point, Palpatine said to Anakin, he was too dangerous to be left alive. And to me, that's a pretty good parallel between... when Windu says he's too dangerous to be left alive about Palpatine when, Anakin ends up killing Windu. Nice little parallel. Yeah. Interesting. Anyways, Palpatine realizes what he can do with Anakin here as they're fighting, and he encourages Anakin to kill Dooku, knowing that if he does, after using this power, after using the darkness, he'll feel what it was like, and know that he has this power. Know he has the power to do anything. And Dooku starts manipulating him, saying that, maybe it wasn't the Jedi way, but it was the right way. Again, let me know what you thought of all this. I thought it was a lot of fun. Super interesting. Alright, thanks for watching, everybody. Go check out the most recent videos. They were a lot of fun to make. And yeah, if you're still here, thanks for choosing my video out of all the videos on the internet. That's cool. Alright, thanks, everybody. See you in the next video.